Hello, everyone, and welcome to the leadership show called My Great Aunt EDNA. The show speaks on excellence, doing things the right way, no shortcuts, and accountability. I'm your host, MacMcNeil, and today we have a special topic with a very special guest. If you or anyone you know has been a victim of abuse, you definitely want to hear from Kevin McNeil, who's an internationally acclaimed speaker on child advocacy and a retired police detective in the same field. Kevin talks about how taking shortcuts to recovery is not the best way to do things. Enough said. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of My Great Aunt EDNA, the leadership show about excellence, doing things the right way, no shortcuts, and accountability. We have a great guest today. His name is Kevin McNeil. And yes, the McNeil is spelled just like mine because he's family. He's one of my cousins, but he's also a great leader, and you'll see why Kevin is invited to this show today. So let me tell you a little bit about Kevin McNeil. So Kevin McNeil is a transformational speaker, a victim, an advocate, an author, and CEO of the 12 Project, which is an organization that educates the world and the effects of trauma and abuse on individuals, families, and communities. Kevin retired from the DeKalb County Police Department of Georgia after 20 years of service. He served 8 years as a police officer and 12 years as a Special Victims Unit detective. He travels internationally, speaking on topics relevant to child advocacy centers, police departments, Department of Family and Children Services, district attorney's offices, athletic organizations, schools and universities, parents and foster parents, as well as community members. Kevin has appeared on numerous radio, television, and podcast programs, including TV One's crime investigative series, Fatal Attraction, and has been a guest on Jim Clemente's podcast, Best Case, Worst Case, along with being featured in several magazine articles. As I said, there's a reason Kevin is on this show. He's a leader, and he's a leader in a field that's extremely impactful and important to what's going on in the world today. So with that, I want to introduce everyone to Kevin McNeil. And Kevin, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Mac. I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I'm Kevin McNeil. As you said, I'm family. I'm a retired special victim detective. I spent 20 years, investigating child abuse crime and sex crimes, and also 8 years patrolling the streets as a police officer. And once I understood that I had a responsibility of all the knowledge and all the experience that I had a responsibility to go back out and give to serve the community in a larger capacity. And so, now I do Apology Accepted. I got a new podcast coming out that's actually dropped this month called Apology Accepted, the power of self-love. And why I started that is because a lot of times we know how to give love to everyone but ourselves. And oftentimes we're searching for love outside of ourselves. And we don't have the courage to love ourselves. And it takes courage to love all of yourself, not just parts of yourself. So in this podcast, I talk about, some of the things that we need to do to love ourselves and have a great relationship with ourselves. Because out of the relationship with yourself comes every other relationship, including that one with God. So I really want to help people understand that, you're responsible for your life. You can't accept, even though I'm married, I can't hold my wife responsible for loving me. That's my job, right? And so
Right.
I want this podcast to be helping and healing to people who have trouble loving themselves. There are many people I know that are in leadership positions and power positions, but they still don't love themselves. And so I just wanted to start a podcast to help people. It drops every 2 weeks, just to help people. It's on iHeartRadio, it's on Apple Podcasts. You can access them through those streams, those platforms. But yeah, that's who I am, man. I'm also a survivor of childhood abuse, and so something bad happened to me, and so instead of blaming what happened to me and trying to use it as an excuse and blaming other individuals for what happened to me, I took responsibility. And that led me into my doorway or to the pathway, the port of leadership. For me, that's what leadership is taking responsibility.
Great opening. And what I'm thinking, of course, I know a little bit about what you're doing, but what I'm
Yeah,
thinking when I hear you speak is this is something that men need because there are so many things that I
yeah,
see out there in the internet, in the world about women and self care and abuse and
yeah,
recovery from that. But it's very
yeah,
rare to hear a man, first of all, put himself out there, but then
yeah,
offer that
man.
assistance to everyone. So I
Yeah,
absolutely applaud you for that. Yeah.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, men is one of my main topic, my goal in producing this podcast because men don't understand their greatest power is vulnerability and being able to be vulnerable and real. And oftentimes we armor up. You know what I'm saying? We build walls
Yeah.
and we try to pretend that we're tough. And men have feelings too. If we didn't, God would give us tear ducts, right? So, yeah. So that's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna get into a few of these formal questions. So the first one I have
Okay.
here. So, you've been in leadership capacity for several decades. And so what would you
Yeah.
say is the single most influential moment in your life that let you know that you were a leader?
Oh man, I remember this like yesterday. I was 17 years old. I just graduated high school, man, and I never forget. My mom stayed in South Memphis, which was bad neighborhood. And I graduated, and I remember staring out at the screen door in the hood that I was living in, and I just saw people sitting around. I saw people getting drunk. I saw people hanging on street corners, and I'm looking out the door, and I'm saying to myself, "What now?" And I had a decision to make. I said I could go out here and get a job and I could do what everybody else is doing. Because that's what I was raised to do, to get a job. And I looked, and just so happened, I remember this recruiter, this Army recruiter, had been, vetting me through high school. I played football and sports, but I knew I wasn't going to be, I'm 5'5", you know what I'm saying? So I knew, it was a long shot getting into professional sports, even though I had scholarship offers, for track and field. But I knew at that point that my decision would lead me to the rest of my life. And for me, that decision was the best decision I could have made in my life, was to get out of my comfort zone, get
Mhm.
out of my familiar surroundings, and go to a place that I would be challenged. And that was the US military, that was the Army. And so going around people I've never met before, going places I've never been before. And so that's when I knew I had the responsibility, because once I got on that plane and landed, man, Gus and them drill stars started yelling at me. I was like, man, what did I get myself into? And so I knew at that point that I could either turn back around and quit, or I can, take the challenge. And for me, that's when I knew leadership was an important part of life. In fact, one of the most important parts. It's like John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls on leadership. And leadership is nothing more for me. It's responsibility, making decisions. And so that decision let me know that, hey, from this point forward, you have, everybody had a decision. Everybody is not a leader in a
Right.
sense. Most people are followers. They follow what people tell them to do. They follow what they think is convenient. They follow what the easiest path. And leadership is not about that. Leadership is about accepting challenges, accepting, the unknown. For me, the unknown is the most powerful path to learning who you are and what you were created to be. So that's when I knew at 17, man, staring out that screen door, seeing people just wasting their life, if I could put it that way, because they were too indecisive and they didn't want to take responsibility for their lives. And so I knew that I was a leader, if not nothing more. I was a leader of my own life, my own decisions.
Oh, that's a great
So
answer. I
yeah,
love the end of that.
yeah,
Leader of your own life.
yeah,
Outstanding.
yeah, man,
So,
yeah,
so in your current leadership role, it's stripped and courageous and transparent and mission of your own past. And you talked about that a little bit. How did you move
yeah,
beyond normal human barriers of fear and potential ridicule to become a sought after leader in your field?
yeah. I think for me, I was unhappy, and as a man, going back to the what we talked about, men not being honest about their emotions, I was unhappy. I was in the military. I was a sergeant in the military, and it almost seemed like people were still making decisions for me. Like I had went to Kuwait, and then I came back, and then the sergeant wanted to send me again, and I thought that was unfair. And I said, you know what, it's time for me to get out. Everything has been a decision. And so for me, at the age of 12, for people don't know that about me, I was kidnapped and raped as I came home from school. I was coming from a friend's house, man. This guy pulled me up on a set of bleachers in a football field and raped me, and then tried to kill me. He got on top of me and started struggling. And then I had to fight him off. And I fought him off, and I ran all the way home. And I never told my mom the truth. You know, I was too embarrassed about it, and I told her I was robbed, and she could believe that because we were staying in a rough part of Memphis.
Yeah.
And I went through most of my life, man, going through these traumatic experiences and addictions, sexual addictions, alcohol addictions. And I noticed one thing that kept me addicted to these things, that I felt like I deserved something. I felt like life owed me something. Like, this happened to me, there has to be something owed to me because of this trauma in my life. And it wasn't until I realized, wait a minute, nobody owes you anything. The fact that you were able to get up and still live, because now I live in the city in Atlanta where the Wayne Williams murders happened. It wasn't lost on me that God has reminded me that a lot of boys, that happened to a lot of boys, particularly here in this city, and they didn't get up. They got killed. And so that was then I learned the responsibility. Like, wait a minute, you got up. Now you have to do something with that. God allowed you to live. And so now for me, it was about, let me go out into the world and teach people, particularly men, how to understand their powers through vulnerability. And so when I became a Christian, I saw, people told me that Jesus asked 12 disciples to follow him, and that wasn't true. Jesus wasn't looking for followers. He was looking for leaders.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but to lead, you have to be uncomfortable and be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so I knew when I stood in front of crowds and told my story, I had a responsibility first to tell my mom the truth, and then to go out into the world and say, hey, listen, we all have traumas in our lives. They may be different, may not be as tragic as mine, and may even be more tragic. But if you live through it, you have a responsibility to help somebody else get through that pain, that darkness that you came out of. So I knew then I had a responsibility. And that's what led me to really be okay. And that allowed me to go through life, really forgiving myself about blaming myself. It allowed me to stand in front of groups of people and know that I was going to get judged by some people, but when you standing in front of people, you out front, that's how you become a leader in your field. You stand out front, and just like the disciples, the world judged them. Just like Martin Luther King, the world judged him. We celebrate them now, but when they were in the midst of their leadership responsibilities, everybody didn't like them. And so that was my greatest problem, though. And that's still a challenge I struggle with today. It's trying to be liked. And I try to get people to understand that that's one of the greatest lessons I've learned as a leader. That if you're seeking to be liked, you're not really service oriented or people oriented. You're too selfish and too focused on yourself. And so to be a leader, you can't be concerned about being liked, because everybody's not gonna like you, because you're making hard decisions, and they don't like those decisions you're making, but they don't want to take that leadership position themselves. And so, that's one of the issues I understood, and I now understand is a real important caveat to become a leader and be a leader. And so that allows me to kind of like step in front and say, okay, these are some obstacles. I got to be uncomfortable and be willing to take full responsibility of everything that comes my way, of everything that's laid in my lap and in my hand that God has given to me. Because, the scripture says, to whom much is given, much is required. Then there's another scripture that goes with that says, God won't put more on you than you can bear. And I thought, man, I was taught that wrong. What that means is the more responsibility you're willing to take on, the more willing you are to be a leader, the more God gives you. You can't have success without wanting to be a leader. In fact, I tell people, the first thing I ask people, what was the first thing that God gave Adam and Eve when he created and put them in God? They said a job. I said, no, he didn't give them a job. He gave them a responsibility. And how they handled that responsibility more was laid upon them. And so a lot of people, my friends, they complain about life, but I recognize there's a commonality in all my friends who are not successful as they want to be. They're not willing to take responsibility for their lives. And so with that comes ridicule. With that comes judgment. With that comes people not liking you. With that comes you having the courage to be who you are in the world, just as you are, and always seeking to be improving, And so that's one of the things that helped me understand that, there are going to be challenges and obstacles, but I knew that I had to take control and take leadership, and being liked, that just, if I love myself, I don't have to worry about other people liking me. That was my point.
Another great ending to that question.
Yes, sir. I appreciate
If
you.
I love
Yes, sir.
myself, I don't have to worry about other people liking me. Great point.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I do have to go here, though. You know this. You knew this question was coming. So you've been a
Yeah.
police officer,
Yeah.
and I must say that this is one of the most distrusted professions within the Black community. So
Yeah.
what did you learn from that profession that you currently use in your own leadership philosophy today?
Yeah, being a police officer, I understood that, you know what, and I got a new book coming out called Arresting Trauma, and that's what I talk about, that police officers are given unfair responsibilities to police trauma. That's what we're trying, and you can arrest trauma, right? And so we're all dealing with trauma, particularly if you're African American, a person of color, right? The slave trade, our ancestors didn't deal with that trauma, so they passed it along. I deal with epigenetics, and I deal with a lot of science behind that transformational, you know, uh, energy that comes from past generations and intertransgenerational trauma that is passed down. So you're dealing with somebody's trauma that you didn't even know, you were carrying. And so as a police officer, I kept going into homes and I saw this, and as an investigator of child abuse, I was seeing some of my victims in my child abuse cases end up growing up to be teenagers who were ending up on the homicide and the robbery side of things. And I was like, wait a minute, because they didn't deal with their traumas. And so I think a lot of times people don't like the police, but I think it's a responsibility that is given over to people. And every police is not, just like in any profession, it's not
Right,
going to
right.
open up. I ran into officers I didn't like, but I think policing, and I know that's the big move to defund the police. There are people who want to abolish police officers, and and I talk about that in my new book. It's taking responsibility. I got a chapter called "Taking Responsibility of Our Trauma," right? And not blaming somebody else and to add them to take responsibility for what we should fix. Yeah, I didn't experience slavery, my ancestors did. But what they went through, I now have responsibility to benefit and use it to my advantage. And that means helping other people heal. Now I can't keep blaming the government for to do something that I have the responsibility to do. And I think that's why I get upset with a lot of our African American leaders today. They keep trying to get a system that they don't like to
Yeah.
fix the problem that they're complaining about. It's like, come on,
That's a
man.
good
You know
point.
what I'm saying? You
Yeah.
know, it sounds oxymoronic. If you
Yeah.
ask me, you want the government to come in and fix what you say they caused. And so I think we have a responsibility in our communities to not look towards the police. And I got this platform now, and I'm talking about, if we really want to deal with this police issue and police brutality, we got to teach people not just to fear the police, but we got to teach people common sense. Like I always tell people, we really want to do something, be leaders.
Mhm.
Why don't we get lawyers together, a black coalition of lawyers throughout the country, and we encourage people to get arrested, right? And we're going to come at your aid, and we're going to get you out of your situation if you were unfairly treated. We're going to go against that. We're going to go after that police department's budget, right? We're going to sue them. We're going to make them pay where it hurts. But if you're teaching people to fear the police, then they're running from the police, and then they're fighting the police, they're resisting the police, and then that makes police officers, up their level of force. And so, what I tell people, this is a campaign I'm trying to start right now, is get arrested and not killed, right? But we don't have anything in place as black leaders to say, hey, we don't have anybody coming to our aid. Like we complain about it, but we got people, you got lawyers, who are civil rights lawyers. If we can't keep waiting for somebody to get killed for we to step up and say, hey, the police is the enemy. We got to put things in place. I started my book off actually talking about a story as a police officer. I was in court and I arrested this guy for drugs. And I brought him into court. He asked me what his bond was. I said, I don't know, but this judge is a pretty fair judge. And so it was this white guy who had been arrested for drugs as well, like meth, a more serious drug than I arrested him for. But his family was there. So the judge asked this white guy questions, what do you do? Do you work? And he's like, no, but my family is here. So his mom and dad stood up. And the judge was just like, okay, do y'all promise to give him some support, some help if I let him go? And they were like, yeah, Your Honor, we promise. So he allowed the guy to do a signature bond. So the guy I arrested looked at me like, okay, I'm gonna use that same story. Right? And so he used that same story. He was like, Judge, I need help. You know what I'm saying? I got a problem. And the judge said, oh, yeah, I know you do. And he asked him where he worked. And he asked him, did he have anybody in the courtroom? He said, no, Your Honor. If you let me out, I get help. And so the judge said, no, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna lock you up and keep you in jail for several months. That way I know you're gonna get the help you need, or at least you won't be using drugs. And in my mind, immediately I'm thinking, man, that was kind of racist. That was kind of injustice. But then I thought about it. This white guy, the difference between the white guy and the black guy, other than the skin color, was that he had a support system with him.
Mhm.
And the judge released him to the support system. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I wonder, the only way I can call that judge racist or unjust if the black guy had his mom and dad there too, or somebody in his family, and they said we would support him. He denied that black guy the same opportunity he gave that white guy. But I was thinking to myself, because I knew that judge, I didn't know him to be racist. In his mind, he probably was thinking that he was giving that guy an opportunity to think about his life, to be without drugs for a minute. And so my challenge to people who don't like the police is get involved and solve the problem. You can't cure hate, with hate. Martin Luther King said only love can do that.
Mhm.
And so, being angry about slavery won't heal us from it, you know. So being angry about something won't solve the problem. We have to do more than just be angry. We have to do something about it. And that's why I call the child to take responsibility for our trauma. My trauma is your trauma,
Mhm.
and vice versa. So, if we take responsibility in helping each other heal through the process, then I think, if you want to make police officers irrelevant or reform the police department so they can have other roles, then you have to have something come alongside that and say, hey, here's what we are proposing. You can't just say get rid of this if you don't have that. That's irresponsible in my mind.
Yeah. Again, another great answer. And
What's that?
I'm thinking through multiple scenarios right now as you're speaking. Like my brain is just pinging everywhere.
Yeah,
But in particular, I just did an interview with a
yeah.
young lady. Her name is Nicole Tinson. And I think it would be
Mm,
an awesome experience to put the two of you together. You're both leaders, you're both
yeah,
very intelligent, both very passionate about what you do. But I think it would
yeah.
be some complimentary conversations that, we might do a show on that. I'm thinking through like
Gotcha.
get the two of you
I,
together
I, I would
and
love
talk
that.
through those scenarios. So,
Yeah.
to keep this thing moving, my great aunt Edna speaks of taking no shortcuts. So, what does this phrase mean to you in the work that you do
Yeah.
today?
Yeah, man. When I heard Bishop T.D. Jakes say something that I felt hit home for me. He said, "Gifted people are sometimes the most lazy people because it comes to them. Like for me, speaking comes to me naturally, and I have a tendency to say, okay, I got an engagement like next week. I get ready for it next week, right? Because I know every time I get up, I can perform. I can deliver.
Yeah.
But what that does is it keeps me at a certain level, and I'm taking a shortcut, and I'm not using my gift responsibly. And so
Okay.
for me, taking the shortcut means anytime that you're not getting up every day and when your foot hit the pavement, to say, I have to do something today to better myself. There are no shortcuts. And that's something that I tell myself. Being a brown guy in this field, I'm one of the few brown guys in the speaking field that speaks on this topic that travels around the world and the country.
Yeah.
And I have to work extra hard. When people want to book me, they ask me for videos, they ask me for references, they ask me for, do you have any evaluation that you have from the conferences you spoke at? So, and I check around to my, counterparts who don't look like me, and they said, we didn't have to give that. So
Yeah.
for me, it's not an excuse. It just says there's a scripture in the Bible I love about the parable of the talents. I love this scripture because most people think that the guy that was given 5 was the most gifted. I don't. I think the person who was given the least was the most gifted. And I think
It's a
that
good way to
because
look at
he
it.
had more in him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had more in him, and God gave him 2, or the guy gave him 2 because he know he had more in him. And he was dependent on him to take responsibility for what he had possessed. And so, but what he did, he tried to take a shortcut. He blamed, the owner. He buried the gift.
Yeah.
And so I think when you start talking about shortcuts, that's what you're doing. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you can neglect the work to get great at something, right? Being good and great are 2 different things. And people who take shortcuts can be good, but they'll never be great. And you see those people, these has-beens, these one-hit wonders in music and
Yeah.
movies, so they take shortcuts. I think if you look at groups like, the Beyonce, yes, she was more talented, but if you watch her work ethic, right, like
Yeah.
the Jay-Z's, they don't take shortcuts. And I think sometimes what happened, I was using an example of the young kids, people are so happy getting in the door and being what they call successful They
Yeah.
never discovered their possibilities. And I think with shortcuts, you shortcut not only your greatness or your ability, but you also shortcut God. And I
Hmm.
think, there's a scripture, the scripture is a tithe and offering, but it says, will a man rob God? Right? And
Yeah.
so God given me a gift and a talent. And I get up every morning and say, I'm not going to read. I'm not going to study. I'm just going to wing it. I
Mm.
have a responsibility. And if I try to take a shortcut, for me, that's dishonoring God. For me, that's how you worship God. By taking responsibility for responsibility, that means that I'm gonna find out what I need to be at the top of my game. And I'm gonna make sure I use my time wisely, my resources wisely. If I have to buy a course to go through a course, I'm gonna do that. While my friends buying alcohol and they're going to clubs and they're doing all this, I'm home reading. Right?
Yeah.
There are no shortcuts. So when I hit the stage, people come to you when you're good at something, they'll say, oh man, you great, you know, and they don't know the work that went into what
Yeah.
you did. They just see you in that moment. And there was a parable that I heard, I think changed my life forever. It was a guy, this wise wisdom teacher had this student. The student came to him and said, how do you be great? He said, I teach you how to be great. And so he brought the guy to a graveyard. He said,
Mhm.
I want you to stand in the graveyard and I want you to curse everybody in the graveyard. I just want you to say that the worst things that ever happened is good, that the earth is getting rid of
Yeah.
them, good that they're dead.
Yeah.
And so he went to the graveyard. He screamed at all the dead people, you the worst thing that ever happened is good that you buried. The earth don't need you anymore. And so the teacher came back and said, hey, what did they say to you? He was like, what do you mean, what did they say? He said, they didn't say nothing. He said, okay, I want you to do the opposite now. I want you to applaud them and I want you to, uplift them. I want you to give them all the accolades they can get. So
Mhm.
the student did it again. Said, you are the most wonderful people. The earth is mourning because of your loss. We have greatly lost great people because you're in the ground. We wish that we still had you. So the teacher came back the next day. He said, what did they say? He said, what do you mean? Nothing. He said, if you want to be great, you have to be like dead men. You have to be able to ignore what is said about you in a bad way
Yeah.
and ignore what is said about you in a good way. You have to keep moving despite
Mhm.
what people say about you. And so, in spite what people think about you, if they applaud you for your work, you got to work
Mhm.
harder. Right? And then I remember this quote I saw also. It said, if you're going to be greater than your opponent, then you have to work twice as hard than your opponent will ever think about work. So if he thinks about running 1 mile, you run 2. So, for me, that's how I feel about shortcuts. I can't take them. I can't afford to. And for me to take a shortcut, I'm dishonoring God because I'm telling God I'm not grateful for the gift that He's
Yeah.
given me, and that I want to use my gift for me. And I don't think that God is worthy of the time. He's not worthy of the resource. He's not worthy of my struggle to get good use of what He's planted in me. And I think God, just like any investor, wants an ROI. He wants a return on investment. If God invested in me, and proof that God is investing in you, you breathe, right? You have life. God wants a return on His investment,
That
and
he
you can't
does.
do that by taking shortcuts.
Great answer. Probably the best answer I've heard on that question since I've been asking that question.
I appreciate
So
you. Yes, sir.
yeah, so I have one more question for you, and this is my statement
Okay.
question. So as a leader in
Okay.
today's environment, uh, what are one or two things that pisses you off that you wish you could change?
Wow. I think the first thing I think I alluded to earlier is blaming people for the problems that you want to fix. And I think when you blame people and you expect other people to fix a problem, there's a quote. I don't know who said it that says that you're the problem. You're the answer to the problem that you seek and seek to solve. And so I love that because if you think about it, Jesus' mother birthed her own deliverer, right? Moses' mother birthed her own deliverer, right? But they both gave birth at a time when it was not convenient or it was dangerous and they had to have courage. So for me, what pisses me off by some leaders, they're always blaming. They're always showing up after things happen.
Yeah.
They don't have they're good at, telling you what the problem is. They're good at pointing to the problem, but they don't have the solution. And that pisses me off. And that I get in trouble a lot because you can't keep telling people they're bad or they're
Yeah.
unworthy. And then in this other breath, you want them to be the best that they can be. but you're making excuses for them. And like you said, they want to take shortcuts. There's reason people play the lottery, right? They think they deserve to win. They don't believe they're going to win. They think they deserve to win, and they want to take a shortcut to get in what people work hard to get to. You know what I'm saying? But they don't want to take that same $5 and invest it, because that's leadership, right? It's taking what you're giving and multiplying it, right? And so that's the first commandment that God gives Adam and Eve, to go forth and multiply, be fruitful. And so most of us go to church and we sit up here and the best way you can honor God is multiply what God gives you. You know, that goes back to the parable of talents. And I think that's one of the things, that's my pet peeve, fix it. Don't blame. Okay, they may be the problem, but what are you doing to fix the problem? And I think another pet peeve of mine is making money the sole purpose of your work. And I think I get offers all the time, and people want me to come speak, and they want me to influence people, motivate people how to make money doing speaking. I turn them down. It's like, that's not why I speak. I don't speak for money. God gives it to me because I try to be, honorable and faithful with my craft. But that's not my purpose. And I think a lot of leaders that you see have faded in the background. They've accepted contracts and money. And when you accept money on other people's terms, you can't say what God gives you to say. Right. So for me, exactly. For me, leaders are disruptors. They disrupt whatever industry they walk into, they disrupt it. They get rid of status quo, and they create other people who want to be leaders. And for me, most leaders think they're supposed to make followers. And that's how they gauge their leadership. If all you have is followers, you're not a leader. Right? You're a manager. And so great leaders make other leaders. And so I think those are two of my pet peeves. Look, let's not blame people and let's not make this about, our growth, our success. I think Jay-Z said it best. He said, if you're the only millionaire in your bunch, your crew, you know what I'm saying? He said that's not a crew. You know what I'm saying? Those people depend on you. You got employees. So and I think that's two of my pet peeves. Look, stop blaming, fix it. You find a problem, you don't like it, fix it. And the other thing about that is, don't use money as your motivator to fix the problem that you sent in the world to fix, because you'll gauge your worthiness, you'll gauge your value based on what you do and don't get. And you'll go after the highest bidder, and that high bidder end up controlling whatever your gift is. And that goes back to what you and I said earlier. That's the key to leadership. That's the core of leadership is responsibility. So when you give people your responsibility, your power, because they're paying you $10,000 to speak, telling you what they want you to say and not say, you no longer become a responsible person. In other words, you're no longer a leader, you're a follower. You're following the money. You're not leading your gift, you're following the money. And so those are two of my pet peeves.
No, appreciate it, Kevin. And thank you
Yes,
for all of these great answers. These are phenomenal answers. And again, you're inspiring me already with a newsletter thought. You gave me an idea for that. And again, I'd love to put you and Nicole together. But before we go today, I want to turn it over to you for any last minute conversations, inspiration, whatever that is for the audience out there. So what would you have to say?
Yeah, man, I would tell people be win, become like win. I tell people win is the most powerful force in the world, if you think about it. And why is that? Because it's not attached to anything. And oftentimes we attach ourselves to our problems. We attach ourselves to our past. We attach ourselves to what we don't have. And we become stuck because all those things become, they become ropes around our hands, our feet. But more important, they become restraints on our mind. And so if you want to be successful in life, become like win. Unattach yourself. This is what Jesus meant when he said, foxes have holes, birds have nests, but man, the Son of Man is not attached to any of these things. So he went anywhere and everywhere God sent him. And he was effective where he went because he didn't worry about the attachments that other people worried about. He didn't worry about fame. He didn't worry about power. He didn't worry about reputation. He was like win. And when you're like win, you'll blow everything out of your way that stands in your way. So that would be my last word to you. Be win.
Blowing me away, man. You're blowing me away.
Yes, sir.
I love it. This is time well spent.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, so everyone that's watching right now, do not hit the stop button yet, because we're going to put Kevin's information up on the screen for you to reach out to him. there's so many ways that you can utilize this man's experience and intelligence to help you in your own journey. So if you've ever been a victim of abuse, if you had know someone in your family that's been a victim of abuse, if you need a dynamic speaker, he has podcasts, he has a new book coming out. It's just a wealth of knowledge. And as you can see, God has put some things in him that he's going to get out. So make sure you reach out to Kevin. And as always, I thank you guys for watching My Great Aunt Edna. Make sure you subscribe on the YouTube channel to hear from leaders from all over the world and how they can help you in your own leadership journey. And so with that, we say thank you, God bless, and may your week be excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's show. And I want to thank our special guest today, Kevin McNeil, for his transparency, sharing his emotions and passion about something that is so important in the world today. Kevin's information is up on the screen. His organization is called The 12 Project, and he has several things coming out. His new book, his new podcast, his new speaking tour, and you can also book Kevin for your own event. Also, I just want to remind you about my book coming out called My Great Aunt Edna, The Golden Girl of Leadership. It will be available in March of 2023 in Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and wherever books are sold. Please go out and get your copy. And also make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel and click that little bell so that you get notifications about the new videos that will be coming out and all the leaders from around the world that will share bite-sized nuggets of wisdom that you can use in your own leadership journey. And with that, I say thank you. May your week be great and excellent, and God bless.